Hello, I'm Mortimer Snerd. If you have enjoyed my first video, then you're in for a treat. If you haven't, stop. Go check it out first, because it is the foundation for the propositions I make in this video. So let's get started. Now, if you put 5 free thinkers in a room with an issue to talk about, you are guaranteed to have at least 10 opinions on that issue. Perhaps I could explain why. As you see now, you are getting a rare look inside my head. More specifically, my moral system. Behind me is a collection of values that guides and influences my decisions and behaviors. These kids represent my highest priority of values out of hundreds of values. Over billions of years to now, this is the collection of values I have. They have come from 5 different places. The first place I get my values is genetics, or those values that are innate. These values are the simplest and most common in all animals. Most of these values can be seen in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Things like respiration, food, shelter, warmth, sex, and sleep. Even some of my distant cousins, like plants and bacteria, share some of these values because they became established in all living things over a couple of billion years of evolutionary development. These are the kids sitting in the back row. I hardly know that they're there unless I'm ignoring them for too long. The second place I get my values is child development. These values I first learned from my mother, then family, and other peers. These are mostly programmed in me from my most influential part of my life. This is where I start placing these kids behind me into an order of priority. These are my first learned and basic values that will make up my moral behavior. Since I have nothing to compare them to, I accept them almost blindly as desirable, important, and useful. The third place I look to start filling this room up with these values is experience. Even though I have values that are innate and those I learn and mimic from my elders and peers, I can start thinking for myself based on first-person experiences. Even though I was taught what was pleasant and harmful, I get to discover these things for myself. I find values while learning how the world works. I didn't have any real organized moral system, but these values are filling up this room. The fourth place I begin collecting values is culture. This comes from family and community traditions. My peers now have more influence than they did before. I have found I don't get to choose my primary language the same way I don't get to choose the culture. This includes food preferences, prejudices, clothing styles, customs, dogmas, and even religious beliefs. This is when I begin really prioritizing which of these values gets to sit towards the front of the classroom. I start listening to some more than others. It is when these values may start to conflict with each other, and I have to make a decision which one gets favor over the others. This becomes new worldview. The fifth origin of values is reason. These are like the student teachers I put into the room to constantly sort out these values, put them into groups, and constantly change their priority status. You might see that fat kid behind me. For me, he was like addiction or religion. He overruled all other values and had first priority. That's until I started using reason and the student teachers. He is still a value, but not one that can monopolize my moral system classroom anymore. He will eventually be kicked out of this room. Since he got quiet, the other values began being heard, like honesty, integrity, logic, pursuit of knowledge instead of the assumption of knowledge, skepticism. These values share with the others to make up my moral system that helps influence my behavior. So, to recap, I hypothesize that our values as highly developed social species build our morals from the origins of values found from these 5 sources: genetics, child development, experience, culture, and reason. But that doesn't answer the big question: how did you and I get here with these values to begin with? How did our society and cultures develop these values and moral systems? Do we get from values to morals to behaviors and to a different priority of values again? How do these values evolve, and what purpose did they serve in our survival and evolution? And how come everyone is talking about altruism as a behavior moral trait that seems to conflict with basic natural selection? Well, I'm glad you asked, but I'm going to leave that for another video. So, if you are a non-believer and get the obnoxious question, if you don't believe in God, where do you get your morals from? You can tell them this: I get my morals from the same place all humans do. A couple of billion years of natural selection for the basics, followed up with a few decades of personal and social participation.